Abusive relationships. When people ask you why you stayed so long, or even go as far as to criticize you for staying so long. When people give ultimatums that if you don't leave the relationship, then they're not going to be in your life anymore, right? I'm going to use a metaphor that I can imagine a lot of people have already heard of and are familiar with in this video because I think that it will be helpful in terms of giving a sense of direction and understanding and really theme as to what goes on in many abusive relationships. Maybe I can't say all of them, but it's fascinating because I've had my fair share of experiences with abusive relationships. Um, no names, of course, but I have heard people ask me why I stayed as long as I did. And I think that I was even criticized for staying as long as I did. And even beyond that, I believe that I was given like ultimatums by people, like if you don't get out, you're gonna lose me, and I just wanted to talk on the subject of abusive relationships, staying, um, why a person might stay. I can't talk for everyone, of course. I can only talk for myself, and I will talk from my own experiences. Um, it's wild. Let's dive into it. So, of course, what I'm going to talk about is the metaphor of the frog jumping into, I guess it's lukewarm water, right? And over time, it heats up and boils, right? I don't really know anybody that would jump into boiling fucking hot water because you would know what's going on right away, you know? You would know that it's fucked up, you would know that it's unhealthy, you would know that it's toxic. Everything that I've learned about abusive relationships, you don't jump into boiling water. Because even probably the unhealthiest masochistic people out there that associate pleasure with pain, right? I don't think that they're going to jump into a ring where somebody is already beating the shit out of them, you know? Um, whether verbally or physically, right? Um, this stuff builds over time, right? So when you meet a person, and it doesn't matter if it's platonic or romantic, right? Um, something called love bombing can happen regardless of whether it's platonic or romantic. From what I've learned, that is. And I believe that I've even experienced it on both ends, both platonic and romantic. But anyway, um, love bombing is this intoxicating experience where you are just what's the word to use for it? You are given more affection than you ever thought possible for yourself, and it feels so good because it's everything you've ever wanted and everything you've never had, right? So there's this element of like the very beginning of everything. Um, and it doesn't just have to be like words of love and affection, it can be like physical gifts, right? Maybe this person wants to mask this horrendous beast that they don't want you to see, and that's why they want to, reel you in, lure you in, and everything. And so they distract you with gifts or with affection, and it's a lot, and it's really fucking fast, like a lot, and really fast, right? So they're trying to get you distracted by all this stuff. And you're like, oh my God, I've never had this before. This is everything I've ever wanted. This is so wonderful. And then you become really attracted and attached, right? Um, yeah, that's love bombing. That in and of itself, for people that are unhealthy, people that lack healthy boundaries, people that don't know the difference between healthy love versus unhealthy love. I mean, that's really the difference there. They're going to get sucked into this dynamic of love bombing, right? And because they've probably held beliefs in their mind that they're a worthless piece of shit, they're really going to buy into it, and they're going to be like, oh, finally, I am no longer a worthless piece of shit. This person adores me, they admire me, right? And then you just go fucking headfirst full into it. So yeah, again, it doesn't start off boiling. It starts off nice and lovely and fucking, oh my god, this person, they you know, they're saying all these wonderful things to me. They're doing all these wonderful things for me. Um, no healthy individual would get sucked into that. They would notice the red flag. Love bombing to a healthy individual is a fucking massive red flag. Period. Um, from what I've learned, only unhealthy individuals get sucked into this dynamic, right? And so then, after the love bombing fades away, and maybe it's not always love bombing, but it is a nice experience that the person that feels worthless has always craved and always wanted, and so they get sucked into it, right? After a while, that fades out. It's just the reality of it. And then over time, cycles, or I should say, dynamics and cycles of abuse start to go into play, right? And so it's fascinating because then the person's like, well, wait a second, what about that? That was so nice. Why don't we just keep doing that? Why don't we just get back to that? Why don't we? You can't. I mean, I really, everything I've learned has told me that you can't. I don't know if it's actually true or not. Um, I've tried. I've spent years trying to get back to that. Um, and the fascinating thing is kind of like, long story short, I would argue in my own experiences that's one of the biggest reasons why people stay long term in abusive relationships, is because they experience that incredible dynamic. Sorry, gotta scratch my armpit. um they experienced that really incredible dynamic earlier on, and you know, as it fades away over time, and they're like, well, wait a second, wait a second, well, wait a second, let's get back to that. That was really cool. That was really fun. That was really great. Why is that going away? Why can't we just stay there? They spend fucking eons trying to get back to that, and, they give their time, they give their resources, they give their money. Um, that's really just the way that it is. So to answer the question as to why people stay in abusive relationships, by the way, love bombing is both unhealthy and, from what I've learned, abusive. Um, Healthy people recognize the dynamic for what it is, and they fucking run in the opposite direction. Unhealthy people that, you know, have limiting beliefs of worthlessness inside of them, they get sucked into that dynamic because they're like, oh my god, this is incredible. I've never had this before. This is everything I've ever wanted and everything I've never had. Um, so they dive in head first, they get sucked into it and everything. And, again, over time, that fades. All of the beautiful stuff fades. But it was so fucking intoxicating that all of the absolutely awful abusive shit that unfolds after that is tolerated because you have this idea that you can get back to that, right? Um, and that's just the way that it is. Again, a frog would jump right the fuck out of boiling water. It would. A person would jump right the fuck out of a room if they were, being abused, if they were being, having the shit kicked out of them. That's just the reality of it, right? I think about the movie Fight Club, right? Um, you think that you can get back to that. I don't know if you ever actually can. I'm not going to answer that. I would argue that you can't, just because, like, I've been in at least one position where I've tried literally fucking everything, and nothing worked because it just doesn't work that way. So yeah, that's just the way that it is. For the people that ask why the people that they care about stay in abusive relationships, if you've never if you're not a healthy individual, if you're not a healthy individual, I'm not laughing at at unhealthy individuals. I'm just, the way that I'm going to approach this is kind of, I guess, somewhat humorous. There's nothing funny about abuse. There's nothing. I'm not trying to suggest that there is, because there's not. There's absolutely nothing funny about abuse. But for the people that don't see the red flags when it comes to love bombing, for the people that feel worthless, for the people that feel like they're a piece of shit and their worth is tied to things externally, and if they don't have that person, then they're nothing. They're not good enough. Love bombing is probably one of the most fucking intoxicating things out there. Pair that with romance. Pair that with human fucking connection. One of the, I would argue, considering that we're social creatures, one of the most fucking important things out there in terms of, you know, just being a social creature, it's fucking wild. It's a wild fucking experience. It really is. And it gets you hooked. Um, it gives you everything that you've never had, that you've always wanted. And that's just the reality of it. So communicating this to somebody who's like, but why'd you stay? It's like, oh, I stayed because I got something really fucking wild in the beginning that I've never had before, that was absolutely amazing and absolutely intoxicating, and then over time, the the abuse cycle and dynamic started to set in and unfold. And I was trying throughout all of those years to get back to that first stage where everything was amazing, you know. Um, and I'm not going to call the very beginning of it not real, because the experience for the person is very real. I know that a lot of people, I'm going to call it, invalidate that and say that wasn't real. That was just this or that. And I can also see how it would be a mask that the person uses to reel the other person in. I could see that, right? Um, but that's just that. So people stay. Well, let me not generalize this. I believe that I could generalize this, but I'll say it from my own experiences. Um, any abuse that I've stayed in has solely been for the purpose of getting back to that initial high of just incredible feeling within the very first part of the relationship. It wasn't because I just love getting the shit kicked out of me, whether verbally or physically. Not to say that there aren't some dynamics of masochism there, because there sure as fuck are, oftentimes, for many abusive relationships. But I stayed because the beginning was amazing. And that's just the way that it is, right? And then you try everything that you can to get back to that. And that's why you stay. You don't stay because it started off abusive and you're fucking boiling to death and boiling water, right? No. Yeah, you don't. No, nobody. I mean, I don't know anybody that would stay in boiling water after they jump into it and recognize, huh, this is really fucking hot. This, when I say hot, I don't mean it in the the sexy way. I mean, like, fuck, this boiling water is really hot. Let's stay. You know, like nobody jumps in and they're like, oh my god, this is boiling hot and it hurts. Let's stay. No, no. Sorry if that fucking destroyed the audio, by the way. Um, no, no. Um, so that's that. Um, it doesn't start off boiling. It starts off lukewarm with the nice, intoxicating affection very early on. Um, whether it's words of affection or gifts, it can be either, right? Whether platonic or romantic. Um, but then over time, the dynamics of abuse and the cycle of that begin, and they just continue and continue and continue and continue and continue. And that's just the way that that is. So I have stayed, and I would stay. Well, not anymore. At least I would do the best that I could to get out of that. But I have stayed in, you know, a relationship like that where, um, that was taking place, and the reason was because I was trying to get back to the amazing things, the amazing ways that things were in the very beginning. It's kind of like somebody who, does a drug. You know, the very first high is absolutely incredible. After that, it becomes desensitized, right? And then you do everything that you can to get back to that high. And unfortunately, for some people, they lose their life trying to do that, right? So, um, no, I can't imagine that I would ever jump into boiling fucking hot water and be like, wow, this really fucking hurts. This is really hot. This is boiling water. Let's stay. No. Not my cup of tea, not my fucking vibe. Doesn't work that way. So yeah, I hope that made that clear. The other thing that's really important to understand here, and I have somewhat experienced this as well. If you have somebody in your life that you care about who you know is in an abusive relationship, understand, or multiple abusive relationships. But it's actually fascinating when it is only one abusive relationship and you realize that that person who's in that abusive relationship only has that relationship that is abusive or that is to that level of abuse. I mean, abuse is abuse, but there are definitely, I guess, what I would argue to be like different levels and everything. Um, unless that person that you care about starts to become abusive and starts to intrude that abuse into your life, um, one of the worst things that you could do is give ultimatums that if that person doesn't get out of that relationship, then you're not going to be in their life anymore. There's a good chance that the person they're in the abusive relationship is already doing a fuck ton of work to isolate that person that you care about from people like you. So, um, you like threatening ultimatums to be like, yeah, if you don't get out of that relationship, we're not going to be friends anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a fine line between like that person desperately seeking an exit and like being not abusive to the other people in their life and that person actually like being abusive because they're being manipulated by the other person and being abusive to you that is threatening the ultimatum. um Abuse is unacceptable, period. If somebody is being abusive to you, if somebody that you care about that you see is in an abusive situation or an abusive relationship in life, um, and they're starting to abuse you, yeah, that is unacceptable. Set boundaries, obviously. I mean, I guess if you want to, do ultimatums and stuff, this, that, and the other, it can help because maybe it'll wake them up. It'll, give them a slap across the face. Hey, get the fuck out! It's time. You're losing people. You're losing people that actually care about you. Um, but when it comes to, you know, like ultimatums and stuff. Like, if you don't leave this person, I'm gonna fucking leave you, you know? Um, if the person that you care about that is in the abusive relationship is not being abusive to you, I would not recommend ultimatums because it's only going to make them feel even more isolated, like the person that is being abusive to them is trying to do to them. Abusive people like actually try to isolate, right? Coercive control. They try to get you alone so that they can further control and abuse you and manipulate you and all these different things. So threatening these ultimatums of your um, you leaving from their life, it's not helpful because it actually probably only further reinforces the isolation of like, oh wow, all these other people that once did care about me are leaving me. Maybe this is real. Maybe this person is supposed to isolate me and keep me alone and by myself and only to them. It just further reinforces that entire dynamic of control, coercively and everything, and it's not helpful. um, so that is why I have stayed in abuse. Um, and again, no names at all, boundaries and everything. Um, but I really can't stress enough the dynamic of like not threatening ultimatums and like actually, um, you know, being there for the person. Like, hey, listen, your relationship is really exceedingly fucked up. You've not told me a single goddamn motherfucking good or healthy thing about your relationship or about that person. But I really care about you and I'm going to remain here, right? And then of course, like you can set the boundaries of like, if you get fucking abusive with me, you're gonna see me leave. You can set that, right? And just help them understand that. But the coercive control, the manipulation, the isolation in and of itself, it's all fucking real. It all happens. It all does. People get isolated from the people that care about them through things like isolation, manipulation, all that stuff, and that's just the way that it is, right? So being there, continuing to be there as a support for that person is definitely helpful. Not threatening ultimatums of leaving unless abuse starts to unfold. Set and maintain boundaries. That's just the way that it is. Yeah, a frog would never jump into boiling water and be like, "Yeah, this really fucking hurts because it's just boiling hot, but I'm going to stay." No, no, no. What happens is the frog is like, "Oh my god, this is everything I've ever wanted and I've never had. Wait a second, where is it going? What the fuck? What's happening? Why are we doing this? Well, that was amazing. Why can't we just get back to that? Let's get back to that. 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 Okay, fine. Here's my time. Here's my energy. Here's my resources. Money, this, that, and the other. Take it. Just get back to that. Just get back to that. Just get back to that. That's how it works.